Abraham Lincoln is often hailed as one of the greatest U.S. presidents, the man who saved the Union and ended slavery. But was he truly a hero without flaws? Or do his decisions paint a more complex picture? From suspending civil liberties to his controversial stance on slavery, and even the largest mass execution in U.S. history, Lincoln's legacy isn't without debate. Was he an angel fighting for justice, or a leader willing to bend morality for the sake of power? That's for you to decide. But before you cast your judgment, stick around. Let's dive into the controversies and uncover the facts so you can form your own educated opinion. Abraham Lincoln's stance on slavery is as fascinating as it is complex. On one hand, he called slavery a moral and political evil and took bold steps to challenge it. The Emancipation Proclamation was a game-changer, reframing the Civil War as a fight for freedom and encouraging thousands of enslaved people to escape to Union lines. It also sent a powerful message to the world, deterring foreign nations from siding with the Confederacy. And let's not forget his relentless push for the 13th Amendment, which finally abolished slavery nationwide. But Lincoln's approach wasn't without controversy. Early in the war, he made it clear that his priority was saving the Union, even if that meant leaving slavery intact. The proclamation itself only freed slaves in Confederate states, not in loyal border states. And his idea of colonizing freed slaves abroad left many questioning his vision for true equality. So, was Lincoln driven by morality or strategy? Maybe it's a bit of both. Either way, his decisions shaped a nation and continue to spark debates today. What's your take? Abraham Lincoln's faith is one of the most intriguing aspects of his life. He often referenced God in his speeches and used biblical language to inspire the nation during the Civil War. His second inaugural address is practically a sermon, reflecting on divine justice and calling for national healing. Lincoln also declared national days of prayer, suggesting a leader deeply aware of faith's power to unify a divided country. But was Lincoln personally religious? That's up for debate. He never formally joined a church, and early in life, he was accused of being a skeptic. Some contemporaries said his beliefs leaned more toward deism than traditional Christianity. Yet, as the war dragged on and personal tragedies like the death of his son weighed on him, Lincoln seemed to embrace a deeper spiritual outlook. So, was Lincoln a devout believer? Or was he using faith as a tool to connect with the people? Perhaps he was both a seeker and a strategist. One thing is certain: his words and actions continue to resonate with those exploring the intersection of faith and leadership. What do you think? The Dakota 38 execution is one of the most haunting and controversial episodes of Abraham Lincoln's presidency. In 1862, tensions between the Dakota Sioux and settlers in Minnesota reached a breaking point due to years of broken treaties, unpaid annuities, and severe food shortages. Desperate and starving, the Dakota people launched an uprising that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of settlers and soldiers, as well as Dakota lives. After the conflict, U.S. forces captured hundreds of Dakota men, subjecting them to military trials that were swift and often inadequate. Initially, 303 Dakota men were sentenced to death, but Lincoln personally reviewed the cases, ultimately reducing the number to 38. This decision was the largest mass execution in U.S. history, carried out in Mankato, Minnesota, on December 26, 1862. Lincoln justified his choice as an attempt to balance justice with the political realities of the time. He sought to prevent further violence by appeasing settlers demanding retribution while avoiding outright genocide. Some praised him for sparing 265 lives, but others criticized him for allowing the execution of men who, in many cases, did not receive a fair trial. The event exposes the complexities of Lincoln's leadership. Was he a compassionate leader navigating a no-win situation, or did he bow to political pressure at the expense of justice? This painful chapter forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about morality, leadership, and the cost of compromise in times of crisis. The Dakota 38 remains a stark reminder of the human toll of decisions made at the highest levels of power. Abraham Lincoln's presidency is often remembered for preserving the Union and ending slavery, but his approach to free speech remains one of the most debated aspects of his leadership. During the Civil War, Lincoln faced intense criticism from opposition newspapers, particularly those sympathetic to the Confederacy or critical of his policies. In response, his administration took drastic steps, including shutting down newspapers, arresting editors, and censoring dissenting voices. Lincoln justified these actions as necessary to maintain national unity and prevent Confederate propaganda from weakening the Union's resolve. In some cases, critics accused Lincoln of suppressing legitimate political opposition rather than merely targeting treasonous rhetoric. Newspapers like the New York World and Chicago Times were silenced under accusations of undermining the war effort, leading to heated debates about the limits of free speech during wartime. Supporters argue that Lincoln acted out of necessity in an unprecedented crisis, prioritizing the Union's survival over constitutional purism. Detractors, however, view his actions as a dangerous overreach of executive power, setting a troubling precedent for curbing civil liberties. Was Lincoln protecting the Union or overstepping his authority? His wartime decisions continue to challenge our understanding of how far a leader should go in silencing opposition during a national emergency, and whether the ends justified the means. One of Lincoln's lesser-known policies was his support for colonization, the idea of resettling freed African Americans outside the United States. This plan aimed to send former slaves to Africa, Central America, or the Caribbean, believing that black and white Americans could not coexist peacefully in the same society. Lincoln even proposed federal funding to assist with this relocation. Supporters of the colonization idea saw it as a pragmatic solution to racial tensions in a deeply divided country. For Lincoln, it may have been a way to address fears among white Northerners and Southerners who opposed the prospect of integrating millions of freed slaves into society. He met with black leaders to discuss the plan, but their rejection highlighted the fundamental flaw. Many African Americans viewed America, not Africa, as their home. Critics argue that Lincoln's support for colonization demonstrates his inability, or unwillingness, to envision a truly racially integrated America. Was it a failure of leadership, or a reflection of the widespread racial attitudes of his time? This lesser-known aspect of Lincoln's legacy forces us to confront the gap between his ideals and his actions. What's your take? Was Lincoln an angel of progress, or a leader shaped by the flaws and challenges of his time? How do his decisions compare to those of recent presidents who faced their own controversies in uniting a divided nation? Leave a comment and let your voice be heard. This debate isn't over yet.